If you have ever been told to just relax as you are trying to conceive, you will know how ridiculous this advice feels. When you are trying to navigate the pressure of time, the opinions of others, doctor's appointments, and everything else that goes into this journey, relaxing is next to impossible. But we know that living in a constant state of anxiety can wreak havoc on your nervous system. It can wreak havoc on your overall health and your fertility. So how do you unravel this? And what can you actually do day to day to make some changes? My guest today is Anna Ferguson, who you may know as Anna, the anxiety coach. And today we are diving deeper because it is not about forcing yourself to feel calm. It's about understanding your nervous system and how this will change everything on your fertility journey. Welcome to your journey to fertility. This is the podcast that blends science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so that you can stop stressing that you'll never have your baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today and pressing play and just sharing your time and your energy with me. Now, to say I am excited to speak to today's guest is a little bit of an understatement. You may know Anna Ferguson as Anna, the anxiety coach on social media. She is a counselor, integrative somatic trauma therapist, coach, and author. After a serious accident as a child, Anna shifted from being an outgoing, adventurous, and energetic person to feeling disconnected and at constant war with her body and her mind. Without having the proper support, guidance, and tools available at the time, this led to a chaotic journey through young adulthood, leaving her feeling exhausted and frustrated and in a system that didn't really know how she fit in anymore. The tools and training that Anna has since learnt have completely changed her life, and she now spends her time helping others to do the same. So in this episode, Anna and I are going to explore how anxiety and trauma and dysregulation can quietly shape the fertility journey and how true healing begins with helping the body feel safe once again. We're going to discuss the link between the nervous system, stress hormones, and reproductive health, and offer practical, grounded tools to bring some calm back into your body and your life. We speak about what a dysregulated nervous system really looks like and why this can be so detrimental to your overall health and fertility. And lastly, we're going to chat about how you can support yourself with these practical tools if you are struggling. I personally found Anna's work incredibly helpful on my own healing journey as well. I found her work a few years ago just as her book, The Vagus Nerve Reset, had been released. And it was around the time I was also studying breathwork, and I had just been extensively through the work of like Bessel van der Kolk and Stephen Porges and all of these sort of like nervous system experts. But I found that the way Anna explained things to be incredibly relatable and easier to understand in a way that allowed me to put those sort of tools and techniques into my own life and my own journey as well. So I am so excited to have Anna here with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me and that beautiful intro.
Well, I could just have written like 15 pages of how much I love your work and everything that you've done and how much you've helped me, Anna. So I really want to name that. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that.
Could we start about learning a little bit more about you? And I know that you have quite a difficult trauma history of your own and in more recent years as well, and how that really led to the work that you do now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually in a roller coaster accident when I was 10 years old. So that was kind of the rupture in my life, the unexpected rupture in my life that led me down this track. And it's only in hindsight that I realized that. But that accident shifted my very way of being. So I went from being extremely outgoing. I loved making friends. I loved just being the life of the party to becoming very introverted, very easily like aggravated. Anger was like my go-to thing in that state. And I don't think I had the language as a 10-year-old. Like I hadn't had conversations around my mental health, around what was actually happening internally for me. So it was extremely confusing to not be the same person that I was prior to the accident, and then not understanding why I couldn't just go back to that person I was before. And I think this was not only frustrating to me, but also to my family, who they didn't have the tools and resources to support me through that as well. They had 2 children that had been in this accident, and they were navigating their own trauma experiences as well. So that kind of led me on a very a very chaotic path. I was a very rebellious teenager. I snuck out of home more times than I could count. I moved out very quickly because I just felt completely at odds with the people around me. I didn't feel like they understood. I had a deep sense of anger towards the people that were closest to me. And that really started to kind of get bigger and more out of control as I entered my later teen years, where I had more space to move around and do whatever I pleased. But eventually I kind of had this moment where I realized kind of the catalyst for the work that I do was when I went and started to train Muay Thai. So I would always go on this tram on my way to school, and I would see this Muay Thai gym, and I was like, one day I want to go in there. I didn't know why. It always just looked cool punching things, and I was an angry kid. So eventually when I was 19, I was like, right, I'm going to go into this gym. And I went into this gym, and I barely made it through the warm up of skipping, but I felt incredible afterwards. Like, this feeling of power from being able to punch was just something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like a passenger in my body, and then I felt like I was taking the driver's seat again. So it was just such an empowering moment for me. And, I went down the path of Muay Thai, became a professional fighter. I went over to Thailand. I trained over there, fully sponsored. I wanted to become a professional fighter, but what kind of was my downfall was my mindset around everything. Like, getting into the ring was such an intense experience, and it's an intense experience regardless of your mindset, but I found it extremely difficult to keep my emotions in check. And so it made it kind of a more challenging experience than I wanted it to be. I wanted to be this joyful experience of doing something that I loved, but in turn it was becoming something that really caused a lot of strain on me, and I wasn't handling it the way that I wanted to. So that kind of led me to circle back around to studying psychology. And, I I have my own opinions and thoughts around psychology, but I didn't enjoy learning the processes that they used in psychology. And I had been through over a decade of therapy myself, and I was pinpointing all of the issues. Like, this is where I felt like I wasn't seen, and this is where I didn't get the support that I needed, and I would walk away feeling worse and I would feel better. And so I studied psychology, and then I went on to study counseling, and then I kind of stumbled into somatics and polyvagal theory, and just looking at mental health from this completely different lens. So my number one thing, I guess, in my own life, and what I encourage everyone else to do, is to be the mad professor, right? So I knew that moving my body made me feel different to how I had felt before, but I didn't understand the mechanisms of why. And so as I was starting to figure out myself, I wanted to be as functional and integrative as possible. So not just borrowing from psychology or polyvagal theory or somatics, but also looking at OT, like occupational therapy, also looking at neuroscience, also looking at all of these different fields that had they were sitting on gold mines of tools to help people process emotions and feel that they weren't talking to each other, right? So that was really the catalyst for me starting off. And I kind of, I guess, forged a path as an anxiety coach. That didn't exist before. I just made that up because I was like, I don't know what else to call myself. But it made sense that when you start to actually bring together all of these different pieces of the puzzle, you actually get something really effective and really functional and really integrative that actually works for people. And it integrates the body and mind as one unified system, as opposed to just coming at it from top down or the cognitive processes or just bottom up processes. So my journey to becoming where I am today is not a linear one. There was like lots of twists and turns in the road, lots of self-doubt along the way, but it was really just me figuring out myself and then sharing what I had learned with those around me, and seeing the response from people was just an incredible push to continue on, because people would be like, oh, I felt broken, and then I tried this one thing and I just had a moment of reprieve. And I think that moment of reprieve is like all it takes sometimes to be a catalyst for huge change in people's lives.
Gosh, I completely agree. I feel like we're always looking for like the magic pill or the one thing that's going to help. But like that doesn't really exist. It's not the one thing. It really is. I talk so often with my students about this idea of like you find your own toolkit, the things that work for you. And you're right, they don't talk to each other, which I find very frustrating, especially when it comes to talk therapy. And it isn't the one thing that's going to help you. It is finding the combination of things that really works for you and your body, that is, which I can't wait to talk to you more about today as well. So thank you for just raising that as well. I would love to start by asking you, what is trauma? Because I think it's a word that gets thrown around a lot these days. It becomes quite a colloquial word in a lot of senses. But when we think about it on a deeper level, I always think that people will refer to trauma as, well, I've just come back from war, or I've been in an accident like you were, or I've, been a victim of abuse. But trauma doesn't have to be that dramatic, does it? And it shows up in a completely different way. So can you explain what is trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Even as someone who had been in a roller coaster accident, I didn't see what I had gone through as traumatic, right? It still seemed like it was much too like small, ridiculous to be added into people who had been to war or had been abused or had gone through like physical violence. So it took me a long time to kind of come to terms that actually what I had gone through was traumatic. And that was when I started to look at the works of Peter Levine. And I love his kind of summary of anything that is too much, too fast, or too soon, right? So anything that overwhelms our current capacity to deal with the challenge that is in front of us. And that is going to change on any given day, right? So depending on how much sleep you have, the support you have around you, your current state is going to be more or less vulnerable to challenges that arise in those days. So if you don't feel like you are capable of handling the challenge that is in front of you, whether that is going to a doctor's appointment or whether that is something bigger like a car accident or going through many different experiences in life, anything can become, I guess, traumatic in that sense, right? So it's an overwhelming of our capacity to handle these challenges. And what happens when we are overwhelmed by what is in front of us is we rely on our survival responses. So we have our sympathetic fight or flight response, or we can go into this shutdown, freeze, collapse response as well. And both are extremely protective and extremely functional. And I think a lot of people kind of feel a lot of shame when it comes to the shutdown freeze response, because they feel like they want to take action and they couldn't in that moment. But just know that that freeze response is actually your body kind of flooding you with these endogenous opioids to create more pain resilience, right? So I went into freeze response when I was in the roller coaster accident. I had this kind of like out of body experience where I couldn't quite hear things the way they were. I was watching myself from the outside. It all felt very dreamlike because my body was protecting me from the actual pain that I was experiencing. It was too much for me to handle in that moment. And so I went into this protective mode. Now, I think what's most important when it comes to traumatic experiences and looking at trauma, I know some people like to use big T and little t trauma. I mean, physiologically, they're both exactly the same. So I think trauma is something that's highly individualized and highly personal to you, and how you are, your perspective of a situation or event is going to deem whether or not that is a traumatic experience for you. So I think we love humans as to categorize things and to label things and to go like, well, going to war is a big T, and your mum not giving you enough emotional support when that's little t trauma. But physiologically, they're exactly the same, and your experience is just as valid as someone else's. And I think that's really important for people to especially going through like their fertility journey, is these things can get brushed off because they have become normalized, right? Like it's normal to go to a doctor's appointment, to IVF, or to go through rounds of hormonal changes or all of these things that happen. Yet we are missing the nuance that actually occurs on a physiological level when someone has to deal with something chronically over a prolonged period of time as well. And so I think it's really important to have a far more nuanced and personalized approach to looking at what trauma actually is.
And could it be that like a big T trauma for someone is a little T trauma for someone else?
Absolutely. Like I said, it depends on who you are, like the state that you're currently in. Two people can have the exact same experience and come out the other side and have very different responses to it, right? So two people in a car accident, one might walk away and be like, "Phew, that was close," and continue on with their life. The other person might be stuck and not want to get back into a car. They have like these experiences of being sensitive to noises. They were in the same experience, but it depends on like your current feelings of capability and competence, right? So some days I feel like I could take on the world, and some days I just don't want to get out of bed, right? And on those days that I don't want to get out of bed and I do, and then I'm faced with challenges, it always blows up way faster because I don't have the resilience to actually, or the capacity to handle that. So I think, if we can shift away from that kind of labeling of what is each thing and instead understand what our own experience and our body's response to that was, then we create a much more open and honest conversation around these experiences and educate ourselves more on our physiology as well.
Can you explain how this idea of trauma gets stuck in your body?
Yeah.
And I think people might see a lot of stuff on social media about how to let go of trauma from your hips and all these exercises you can do. And I'm just like, it's not like a thing that comes out that you can see. So I find it's a really hard concept for people to get their head around.
Yeah.
So can you explain that a little bit better for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea around how the body, I guess when Bessel van der Kolk talks about the body keeping the score, is essentially when we are faced with challenges, our body will shift its physiology to handle that challenge, right? So for example, if I'm in a car and someone is road raging next to me, I might feel my shoulders tense up, right? I might hold onto the steering wheel really hard, right? So these kind of physiological changes are bracing me for that fight response. And so what occurs when we are going through a traumatic experience is our body goes into these different physiological states. But when there's no resolution to that state, our body learns to organize itself around those tension patterns. So our musculature will change. We might end up having a sore lower back, sore shoulders, digestive issues. Autoimmune conditions are really normal because when we're experiencing anxiety or distress, our metabolic system goes offline. We don't need to digest food when we're fighting off or fleeing from someone. So these, I think a better way to look at it is patterns that have been useful to us in a moment, but then our structures have organized themselves around those patterns. Now, I'm not one to say like, oh, you have like your emotions stuck in your hips. But if you are someone that has a lot of tension in your glutes and your like psoas muscle and your abdominals, then yeah, your hips are going to hurt because you're bracing in a way that's holding your body not in its optimal way, right? And that can be due to a number of reasons. Like it could be structural, but it can also be from these emotional experiences that we have as well, and how your body has protected you structurally and physiologically in order to handle that, but then not down-regulated. And it's held on to that pattern because, hey, it's useful. We've had to go through this maybe more than once, and each time this has been a useful way to do that. So we're going to keep this pattern of structural organization and fascial organization around our body in order to continue to protect us. So that is where we get a lot of the hip opening or different exercises that release, I guess, tension and pressure in our fascia that talk about like releasing anger from your shoulders. Like I don't necessarily think it's tied to specific emotions, but I do think it's very individualized in how you have braced for that challenge that you were facing.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be like an exercise to release it for everyone.
No,
right?
no, not at all.
Thank you for clarifying. You touched on this us a little bit this idea of, well, when we are in a state of stress and your body thinks that you are in survival mode and doesn't know whether it's life or death, you're going to start shutting down some of these non-essential systems that you don't need for immediate survival, like digestion.
Yeah.
So can you explain for people how over time, if you are chronically stressed or dealing with something that is like this ongoing stress in your life, how that ends up affecting your overall health? And then if you are struggling with fertility, can that impact your sex hormones as well?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's really interesting when you do understand the biological like cascade that occurs when you go through a stress response. So essentially, our hypothalamic pituitary axis gets activated, which our HPA axis, I'm not going to say it again because I'll stumble over it the second time, but our HPA axis gets activated, which floods our body with cortisol and adrenaline. And this is to really engage our big muscle groups. It also slows down our immune system. So it basically says, you can take a back seat right now, we don't need you. And our digestive system, it turns that down as well. So, which is why a lot of people, when they're anxious, they feel like they need to go to the toilet or they feel constipated, right? So it's our body's way of going like, oh, we need to mass evacuate what's going on in our bowels right now because we need to be able to move quickly. And we might experience things like dry mouth because we don't need saliva to actually eat food while we're in these states as well. So essentially, our sympathetic nervous system acts as this energy increasing machine. And so all of this glucose will get like expelled into our bloodstream as well in order for us to have energy. Now, if you look at if that's you over a prolonged period of time, not only is your glucose going to be elevated in your bloodstream, which can lead to insulin sensitivity and things like diabetes or gestational diabetes, but your digestive system is not actually able to take up nutrients from the food that you eat. You might be having like irritable bowel syndrome type of symptoms as well, where you need to go to the bathroom quite frequently. You also, autoimmune conditions are extremely common because when our immune system goes offline, it becomes highly reactive when there are things that come in and our body's not processing the same way, right? So let's take something like gluten, for example. A lot of people nowadays say they have gluten intolerances, and it's true they do because our body has kind of started to see gluten as a thing to attack because we're all in these highly stressed states, right? So when our immune system isn't functioning properly, it overreacts more and more, which can cause autoimmune issues. But the nervous system is not just our autonomic nervous system, our parasympathetic and sympathetic. It's also our enteric nervous system, which is responsible for everything down below. So our sexual health, our like bladder, all of that stuff is controlled by our enteric nervous system. And I generally don't talk too much about this because it's not my area of expertise, but all of this is impacted by cortisol and adrenaline because these hormones are essentially meant to be short-term hormones. So what they do is they kind of increase our capacity to move, to take action, to be stronger than what we would be normally. But what they don't allow is for the functioning of everyday life to occur. And that includes our sex hormones, and that includes the balance of homeostasis occurring in which we would ideally be in if we were trying to conceive, right? So homeostasis is generally just our baseline optimal functioning of our body. Now, if we're in sympathetic fight or flight, or if we're in that highly parasympathetic state of collapse or shutdown, then our body is not functioning optimally, and this is going to have knock-on effects downstream. And I don't want this to freak anybody out and be like, oh my God, I feel like it's anxiety inducing when someone's like, hey, there's impacts to being stressed. But the truth is that there are very tangible and real ways that you can quickly start to kind of change that as well. But it's really important that we understand the physiology of why something is happening to remove the shame and the stigma and the lack of compassion that we may have for ourselves, because it makes sense when we understand how our body is functioning, why things are going the way that they are in our life as well.
I think people always look at stress as like an emotion. Oh, I feel stressed, like I get happy or I get angry.
Yeah.
And when I try and lay it out for people, it's not an emotion. You're not feeling it like you would happiness. It's this physiological response that your body is having.
Yeah.
And you don't really have a lot of control over it because your body is so much smarter than we are, really. And to think that you can just feel your way out of something is not how it works.
Yeah.
So thank you for explaining that in such detail. I think it's really, really important for people to hear that as well, because you can consider so much that is going on, and to think that we've just got like I'm just going to, talk positively today and I'm going to think something else and it's going to change things is obviously not. So when we are talking about stress and dysregulation within our nervous systems, is there a way for us to recognize when we are dysregulated? Because I think that's the first step, isn't it? That awareness piece, and knowing, especially if you have been struggling through infertility for months or years and you've been through loss and IVF cycles that haven't been successful, you are living in this low-level state of dysregulation for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And it kind of becomes your normal and you don't realize that there's anything that needs to be done to help you come out of it. So what would that look like for someone?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I want to create a very defined definition of what dysregulation actually is, because I feel like we throw it around nowadays as like, oh, I'm dysregulated. Feeling stress is not the same as dysregulation. It is normal to experience spikes in stress. It is normal to go into a sympathetic state to be able to respond to things. We want these processes to happen because they are protective and they do give us the energy to combat whatever we are facing with. Now, dysregulation is where we are entering into that state of, I can't come down from this, right? So a really common feeling that a lot of people will experience is that wide but tired feeling. So I'm restless. I want to just chill out on the couch. I turn the TV on and it's not enough stimulation. I then pick up my phone. I'm scrolling through. Now I'm comparing myself to someone else, but I need this kind of stimulation to make me feel like I'm figuring out my problems, right? So then you head to bed, you can't switch off, you don't have a good night's sleep, and it kind of perpetuates this cycle. So that is probably the most common thing. The other thing is, like you said, that awareness around it is, we have become so good as humans at masking dysregulation as productivity, right? Because we all know people that are like go, go, go all of the time. We're like, how do they do it? They're constantly achieving, they're constantly doing things. But sometimes these people are just able to do what needs to be done, but internally they're not feeling the best that they should be. So I think we need to define that dysregulation tends to be when stress becomes something that we can't reel in, we don't know how to switch off, we're finding it very difficult to release tension patterns. So you might have chronic ongoing shoulder pain or lower back pain or digestive issues. You might find it very difficult to connect with the people that you love. And I think that kind of apathy kind of falls across lots of different areas in our life. Things that we once felt were happy and joyful things for us to engage in don't have the same kind of fulfillment that they once had as well. And I think what dysregulation starts to do is, because you just kind of feel a little bit off kilter for a little bit. So we're like, oh, something's kind of like niggling, but I don't know what it is. The worse that it gets, the more these symptoms will start to scream at you. And eventually they come out as things like autoimmune conditions, or like me, in my case, I always had lower back pain and then I blew out my disc. So it's very nuanced. Everyone's going to show dysregulation in different ways. Some people are far better at masking what that looks like than other people. But I feel like in our heart of hearts, we kind of know when something doesn't quite feel right. And we kind of have moments in our life where we can draw parallels between, like, this moment in my life was where I felt really connected and playful and curious and open, and this moment in my life now is where I feel very shut off to actually being in like day-to-day life and engaging fully. And when your engagement starts to wane of being part of life, that is when we want to start to really kind of bring ourselves back into connection, engagement, and play again. So I think when we start to notice ourselves drifting away from that baseline of what we once knew, it's not going back to who you were, but it's just knowing that that place exists and that we can start to shift our physiology in a way that gives us the capacity to engage with life once again.
And it's not about like avoiding stress, is it? Because like, come on, how do we do that? And I think a lot of people get into this spiral of, well, now I'm stressed about being stressed.
Yeah.
And the worse I stress, the worse it's going to make my health and my fertility. And it's a horrible place to find
Cycle,
yourself
yeah.
in.
Yeah.
So can you explain how, like, that's not the goal? The goal is not to avoid stress, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, like you said, it's impossible. Even if you look at the news cycle in the past week, it's like I expect no one is going to be feeling calm all of the time. The goal when we look at nervous system regulation, working with our physiology, is to create flexibility in how we can respond to things. So if you look at how you are currently, say you are someone who is experiencing chronic anxiety, right? You're constantly responding to things in the same way, whether that's through rumination, what if thoughts, like trying to problem solve this thing. Maybe you're avoiding certain tasks. And these responses are not creating the outcome that you desire, but in fact, actually perpetuating the same outcome to occur, right? So when we look at flexibility, we're looking at giving ourselves a choice. How do we want to handle this situation differently at another time? And in order to create flexibility, we have to create consistency around something. And that's not being like hardline disciplined with a routine or a protocol, but it is allowing things to be integrated in a way that makes sense for you and your life. And so what this means is when we shift this idea from I need to be calm and regulated all the time to I need to be flexible in how I respond, it makes space for us to actually be in that sympathetic fight or flight state. It makes sense for us to be in that dorsal vagal shutdown freeze state at times, but it makes sense that we can also move back into that ventral vagal state of safety and connection too. So if your state is always on in the sympathetic state, the goal is to start to just gently dip your toe back down into that ventral vagal state until it becomes this nice line that we can come in and out with more flexibility. The idea is not to be stuck, essentially. And I don't really like using this word anymore, stuck in these states, because we're never stuck. We do have the capacity to start to change these physiological patterns and bracing patterns that we have. But when we look at it more as flexibility, it kind of removes the demonization that we have to be calm all the time. And it honors the fact that we actually do need these stress responses to support us at other times as well. Does that answer your question?
No, that makes perfect sense. No, it really does. And it leads perfectly into what I wanted to ask you next, which was, I feel like when we have something difficult going on in our lives, in the Western world, the first point of call is, okay, I'm going to go to a therapist or a counselor or a psychologist or whoever. And I think you can relate to this. You touched on it before, but I found that incredibly unhelpful on my own journey. Talking about my feelings and how shit I felt was just made me feel worse.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned before, we can't like just talk our way out of things and have the way that our body feels. So could you explain for us how that works? Like, why is it that we need something more than talk therapy to heal?
I'm going to answer that question, but the first part that you were talking about, where our first point of call is to go to a therapist or psychologist or kind of go through that very cognitive approach to things. I saw a great post on LinkedIn, and I can't remember who posted this, but they were talking about how us as a society has really removed that communal approach to like supporting one another through mental health. And that has been replaced by therapists, by psychologists. And that really hit home for me, because I think whilst I talk a lot about like body-based, and I will talk about body-based things that we can do, the cognitive side of it is still really important, but it has to happen in sequence, and it has to happen in a supportive environment as well, right? So if you have your only port of call is someone who is going to make you talk through your emotions in this very clinical setting, as opposed to just being able to like share with your friends, like, hey, this was really hard for me, then it changes how we process emotions to become something that actually are far more medicalized than they need to be, right? So that it puts so much more weight on these thoughts and feelings and making them important when we're chatting with our friend, they're like, oh, that sucks, right? And that's what you want. You want to just acknowledge that it's hard without being like, let's dissect this. And what did you think about this? That is when we start to intellectualize so much more, right? So my process with working with clients and any books and programs that I share is always within sequence, right? We start with our body, and there's a really beautiful reason behind this. And when we think of how our body and our brain communicate, right, it is through our vagus nerve. It's basically this communication highway. And what it does is essentially send communication from the body. Are you hungry? Is there pain somewhere? Do you need to move? Like, what's your heart rate doing? It sends all of this stuff to your brain. And then your brain will kind of shift around some hormones. It will trigger certain things and it will enact that change. Now, our brain is sending about 25% information to our body, and our body is sending 75% of information to our brain. So if you're just looking at a statistical standpoint, like, our body has the capacity to change the message that our brain is receiving, right? Far more than changing our thoughts and then sending that message to our body, right? So it's like a blip in the radar when we go, oh, what if? And then we go, well, what if this happened instead? And it's like, well, your body doesn't care about what you're trying to think through it. It cares about the physiological change that your brain is going to enact. So when we look at working with our body, we go, well, how can I shift my physiological state to then shift my mindset, right? And then you have, again, coming back to giving you the choice, then you have a choice about what you think about, because it's not as urgent and it's not as fearful and it's not as sticky as it once was, which is why I'm like so dogged on like talking about our physiology and our body and all of these things, because we do have such a beautiful entry point, even if sometimes it feels simplistic or too novel to be something that's powerful. We really do miss out on a beautiful opportunity to work with ourselves instead of trying to like stem the flow with a tiny cork that's not going to do the job. By changing our thoughts, we can really start to work with the flow and use our bodies in a beautiful way to do that.
So I'm so excited to get your perspective on this, because it sounds like why don't we learn this stuff? And if there are like 4 or 5 times more signals coming from our bodies to our brain than our brain to our bodies, why are we not taught to use our bodies as healing tools?
Well, I mean, there's so much noise, and when it comes to like psychology, I love psychology, and it's why I went to study psychology, and I'm actually going back to finish off my psychology masters. But unfortunately, they have this very dogmatic approach to looking at things of, this is what the science says, and CBT and DBT and all of these things are the way in which we know is going to make a big difference. Now, in doing so, it's a very unscientific approach to looking at an individual who's in front of you, right? So an individual who is in front of you may not respond the way that you expect them to that approach. But that doesn't mean that a majority may respond in a certain way. Over what time frame are we looking at? Like, there's so many questions when it comes to this. And so a lot of things get labeled as pseudoscience because of this. Oh, there's not enough scientific backing to this. Now, this was really like when I first started, I was really quite angry when I first started my business, because people were like, do you have scientific data to back that up? And the truth is that if there's no money backing something up, if there's not a kind of body behind it, whether that's the psychology associations and stuff, then they're not going to look at these data points, and they're going to brush it off as pseudoscience, because changing the way in which we do things is costly. You'd have to retrain all your professionals. You have to change the textbooks. You have to do all these things. So there's kind of that shitty bureaucratic side of things when we're not taught these things, because it's just not deemed necessary, and it's also challenging to change it. But what's really interesting? I started my business maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And this is mainstream now, right?
It is now, yeah.
It is now. I held an event last night, and I had a psychologist come, and she goes, I've shared your techniques, your framework, everyone with our whole psychology office, right? And it's blown my mind how often people go, my therapist recommended your page. My psychologist recommended your page. So it is changing. And it's actually changing far more rapidly than I thought it would ever change, which is beautiful to see. And I think there are varying levels to people's understanding and knowledge behind these things. And that's sometimes where it gets a little bit dicey at times, because you've got people saying that they're like somatic practitioners and they're not really qualified to do that, and they're just doing their own thing, which is fine if someone finds benefit from them. But we do have to have some oversight when it comes to these things. And it really grinds my gears that I never like grew up knowing this about myself. It would have saved me a decade of heartache and pain if I had have understood my physiology in a way that actually empowered me to work with my cycles, to understand how I respond to stress, to learn how to work with my body instead of against my body. And it would have probably caused a lot of less stress for my family as well if we had have all worked on that together. So to answer your question, I hope that people feel like they do have a lot more opportunity to step outside of what I would say is like the traditional mainstream state of like psychology or support services when it comes to not just mental health, but fertility as well. And that they are getting the education that they desire that helps remove the shame attached to these types of processes as well. Because I feel like, to me, I'm like, psychoeducation is like the pinnacle on helping us to actually not feel like we are broken, that there's something wrong with us for our bodies functioning the way that they're functioning, that we actually do have control to a certain extent of how we can shift things. And that's not everybody's case, unfortunately. Sometimes our biology is the way that it is, but there, for many, many people, there is space to have acceptance and compassion and empathy towards themselves, which goes a long way when it comes to working with your nervous system and kind of increasing your chances at fertility and just general connection and engagement in life as well.
Which is it's so all related, isn't it? So let's talk about, okay, so someone is listening to this, they're like, this sounds great. I'm going to skip the talk therapy for today. I want to do the somatic work. I want to do the body stuff. Like, where do we even start? What are some of these things that you teach people that really make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, this question always is like daunting to me, even though I have like such a plethora of techniques and exercises. Because it's like, which one do you pick? In different states and different situations, it's going to be different. Now, if you are someone that finds that you are in that high energy state, you're wired but tired, and you're having a hard time like down regulating your nervous system, I want you to understand that what you want to do is not down regulate your nervous system. You actually want to work with that energy that you have. And so we're talking about like frenetic movement, high energy kind of expenditure on using the energy that your body has gifted to you, right? And so, for example, that might look like shaking or bouncing, jumping up and down, doing squats. Maybe it's going for a run, or anything that kind of gets your heart rate up is going to be really beneficial when you're in that like high anxiety state. Now, after you have completed that, that is when you want to start to insert this kind of down regulation process. So everything is a sequence. So you have to identify what state you are currently in. So I'm in this high energy state. I need to use this energy, and then I want to really start to draw myself into that ventral vagal state of safety. So we go high energy, and then we start to look at things like maybe breath work. So things like the physiological side, which is 2 inhales and 1 long exhale. These physiological practices, like the physiological sigh, right? They work with our natural movement of our lung capacity, right? So every 5 minutes or so, we naturally inaudibly sigh subconsciously. And this is essentially so our lungs don't collapse on us. And we can mimic that, because when we mimic that sigh and we make it bigger, what it does is it triggers a number of different processes. So we have these receptors in our lungs called baroreceptors, and when they're expanded and inflated when we take that inhale, they send signals to the heart to slow down, for our blood pressure to drop, for basically our body to come to this more calm state. And so it's really important that when you're practicing something like the physiological sigh, so 2 inhales and 1 exhale, that exhale is much longer than the inhale, because the exhale is where the parasympathetic nervous system is controlling the exhale. Our inhale is our sympathetic response, our exhale is parasympathetic. So you want to go through this sequence, and I highly recommend you be that mad professor and you practice a few different techniques and find what sequence works for you. So you're looking at high energy, then a regulation practice, so something that feels calming to you, and this can be different for each person. But then the third thing that I highly recommend is a connective practice. So how do you then ground yourself more deeply into that ventral vagal state so you can hang out there a little bit longer? And so this is where I really recommend things like co-regulation as a really beautiful way to expand your window of tolerance and feel a lot more safe navigating your day-to-day. So co-regulation is anything that kind of that social engagement system really requires you to do with another person. It can also be with a pet or with a trusted other person. So you have a favorite person online, you could also try to co-regulate with them. There's no wrong way or right way of doing this. It does work with someone that you know and trust the best, because you can make eye contact with them, you can notice their tone of voice, you can notice the side of their eyes if they have little crinkles when they're smiling, you can notice how their mouth changes. All of these little beautiful cues are going to give that, it's like this dance that happens between two nervous systems, and that co-regulatory dance is how humans have evolved, right? And so if we deny the fact that we're interdependent species and we try to regulate solely on our own, then we're kind of missing out a really beautiful way that we get to connect with people around us. So if anxiety and stress disconnects us from people around us, the last thing that we want to do is reconnect to those structures and those systems around us too. So we go high energy, so high movement expenditure when we're in an anxious state. Then we go into a down regulation portion, whether that's a physiological sigh or maybe it's a restorative yoga pose like legs up the wall. And then we go into a connective practice. So if you don't have someone to co-regulate, how can you connect with yourself? Maybe that's through soft touch, maybe it's putting your hand on your heart, maybe that is using an affirmation, looking in the mirror, hearing your voice, changing your vocal tones, those types of things. Now, it looks slightly different if you're in that freeze response. You want to shift the way that you're working with your physiology. You don't want to go high energy straight away, because that's going to be overwhelming and further push you into that freeze response. So if you're in a freeze response, we want to kind of turn the switch down a little bit and start really small. So I like things like heat are really good to start to shift that energy. Your goal is to increase your energy slightly when you're in freeze response. So heat, having hot showers, using heat packs, especially on your chest, your belly, and on the sides of your necks here. Really small movements. So like, can I wiggle my fingers and my toes? Can I, now that I've wiggled my fingers and my toe, can I like maybe roll my ankle around and around, roll my wrists, and start to see how that like movement starts to work through your body. And then lastly, things like eye patterns. So how we kind of engage both hemispheres of our brain is really important when we're in functional freeze response. We become very demotivated to do things. So we can use really low effort and low energy expenditure to start to increase that energy, and engaging both hemispheres of our brain through eye movement is a really beautiful way to do that. So once you've kind of increased your energy slightly from dorsal vagal freeze response, then we can start to kind of work with that energy more. So it's kind of like an extra step in there. Now you want to do something higher energy to utilize that sympathetic energy, and then you want to down regulate, and then you want to connect and ground into that ventral vagal state.
That makes perfect sense. And I know it sounds like a lot, but really it doesn't have to take a lot of time, does it?
Not at all. Oh, sorry. Not at all. I mean, my whole shtick is that if it's simple, you will do it, right? I feel like when we make things, and I'm a victim to this as well. I used to be like, I have to meditate for half an hour, and I have to do all these really rigid things, go and stand in my cold shower for 3 minutes, otherwise it's not worth it. Like now it's, I allow myself to do whatever feels best for me. But everything should take like 5 minutes or less for you to do. So have a sequence, whether that's like jumping up and down on a spot. Okay, you've done that. Now you do your physiological side. Okay, you've done that. Now I'm going to connect with something. I'm going to put my bare feet on the ground. I'm going to touch my hand to my chest. I'm going to look into my partner's eyes. I'm going to notice different things about their physiology. Like, that's really as simple as it gets to be. And that's a portable sequence that you get to take with you anywhere. So I think people really need to take things and make it their own and find what works for them. But don't be tied to bigger is better, because quite honestly isn't, and it becomes something that we just never do.
That's it. It just puts people off immediately, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely.
Do you find there are a lot of like really common mistakes that people make when they're approaching this kind of work?
Yes and no. I think that most people will always want to do more. And more is not necessarily best for a dysregulated nervous system, right? So more means that you're actually piling on a lot more stress to your body and your mind than is necessary. So I think it's a challenge for people to actually just allow it to be simple, allow it to be small, allow it to be achievable, and know that you're doing enough by allowing that simplicity in your life. I mean, everything else is complicated in life. We don't need to add something else more complicated to it. So more and big is not better. Simple, it has to make sense for you. At times it makes sense for you. If you have a chaotic morning, it is not time to throw in like regulation to that mix. If you drop the kids off at school or something, or you are at work and you have a moment to go to the bathroom, that is an opportunity for you to regulate. So find times that make sense for you. Mistakes. I'm trying to think of mistakes that people make. I think they are judging it based on how big their response is as well. So if I do the physiological side, why don't I feel calm immediately? And that's the other thing about our nervous system, right? So some things will give you an immediate response, an immediate relief. Like I feel better now after that. And that is generally after things that are semi-challenging for us to take, because we get that dopamine hit when we're doing it as well. But if we're looking at these smaller things, this is incremental change over time. So consistency is really important for the nervous system. It's how the nervous system understands like what's safe, what's not safe. And if we're doing things like sporadically, when we're in an anxious state, we're not actually giving ourselves an opportunity to learn things as well. So consistency beats length of time 10 times over. So if you can do something for 30 seconds every day, then you're going to be winning compared to someone who is doing 30 minutes of something once a week. So I think when we're looking at like fertility journeys and people struggling through this process, life is stressful, right? So we need to dial it back. And so what is one thing that is going to make sense for me at a time that makes sense for me, that is least energy and effort for me to do it? I don't have to go out of my way to do it. I just need to do it consistently enough that it starts to become this integrated piece of my life.
Best advice ever. I love that so much. Thank you. If someone is listening to this and they really feel like anxiety is just running the show, like it's just overwhelming, what would you really like to leave them with this conversation?
It starts with one action, one breath, one phone call, one piece of connection. It only has to be one small thing that you do, as opposed to lots of things in overhauling your life. So just start small and know that that's enough.
Thank you. Anna, where can we learn more about your work? You have just released your second book.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your newest book as well as your first one that I mentioned at the very beginning, and how people can get a copy of those themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on socials at Anna the Anxiety Coach, and my first book is The Vagus Nerve Reset. That is more of a framework of how to work through different phases of kind of trauma healing, anxiety healing, so chronic conditions. So we go through phase 1 of kind of creating safety, phase 2 of working with the body, and phase 3 of then securing that base and feeling connected to those around you. So that's the framework. Now, my second book is called 21 Days to a Less Anxious You, and that is more of an invitation to explore techniques. So I have put 21 different techniques along with the science and deep dive as to why these techniques work, what's actually happening in our physiology, and I mean, I nerd out on all of that stuff, but I feel like that education side of things is such a motivator, because it allows us to go like, oh, when I do this, this is what's happening in my physiology. And that helps us to believe that things are going to work for us as well. So understanding why and how things work is really what I love to do. But this book offers you 21 different techniques that can be adapted for different states. And you get kind of step-by-step instructions for how to do each of those techniques too. So I'm super excited about it. It's kind of an extension to my first book to give you all the tools of the trade. I haven't held anything back. And that is out now everywhere in Australia, I believe.
Amazing. I'm so excited to get a copy of that. I talk so much to my students about like building up your toolbox, like finding the things that work for you and that help you. And this sounds like A toolbox of toolboxes.
Absolutely. And you can build your protocol from it. So it's a beautiful resource to kind of flick through and find what resonates with you, or you could go through one by one and try all of them. It just depends on what you want to do and how you want to use it. No wrong way.
Anna, thank you. I could talk to you for hours. You explain things so beautifully and so relatably. I think it's the thing that a lot of this stuff can get very heavy and sciencey and complicated, but you make it really simple. So I think that's a huge skill and technique to be able to do that. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we so appreciate having you here on the podcast today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening right to the end of this episode. Now, if you want to get a copy of Anna's new book or her first book, The Vagus Nerve Reset, I'm going to link all of those options for you to do so in the show notes as well. And I highly recommend that you go and follow Anna on Instagram as well. Is it Instagram or do you have other social accounts mostly?
Mostly Instagram.
Yeah. Because she shares so much of little things that you can start to weave into your day along your own journey as well. I find it's a lovely resource of inspiration and tips for your own healing journey. So I will link all of those. And if you have any questions and you would like to reach out, I would always love to hear from you as well. Now, next week on the podcast, this is going to flow on beautifully from today's conversation. We are going to be talking about this one thing that is kind of that overarching thing that is sabotaging you on this journey throughout the months, the years that you are going through trying to conceive. So I am so excited to have you back next week for that episode. But until then, I am sending you all my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility.